We're going to talk about an entirely new way to conceptualize music notation and analysis. It's based heavily on our thoughts of Roman numerals and inversion symbols, but instead of providing a symbol, like a chord symbol that tells you to notate a chord, this provides a bass note and then intervals that lead from the bass note above to produce a different chord or a series of intervals. It's called figured bass because there's a bass line and an inversion figure. So let's take a look at it. The first thing to keep in mind is that each of these chords, lowest pitch is what's been provided. That means the bass note of the chord. And regardless of what voicings or context, we're going to refer to it as the bass note. That is the lowest note in the chord, that is the base of the chord. It is, however, not necessarily the root of the chord. It is figured bass, not figured root. Say that with me. It's figured bass, not figured root. So anytime we see numbers here, these are referring to notes that are going to be added above. Many of these are standard inversion symbols that you can recognize from triad and seventh chord inversions. Some of these are not inversion symbols, and you have to just reason through what the notes are. When in doubt, just count that interval and place that note, and you're probably in a good track. You'll also see in here that there are some other symbols, sharps and flats and naturals, but also slash signs and even plus signs. Those are all changes to what the pitch would normally be in the given key signature. If you just see a number there, that number means use the key signature pitch. But if you see a number with some sort of symbol by it, that might mean to change it a half step higher or a half step lower. What you should look out for is a slash, one way or the other on the number, like you see this right here. The direction of the slash doesn't matter. A plus sign, like you see right here. A sharp, or depending on the context, possibly even a natural. Any of those symbols will say to take that pitch on that number, in this case, the sixth above the bass, in this case, the fourth above the bass, and when it's not next to any number at all, when it's just floating out there in space like it is here or right here, that means a third above the bass. The default amount with music is that things are built in thirds, so the default thing it should apply to would be the third. It will never apply to the root because the root, or never apply to the lowest note, I should say, of the chord, because the lowest note of the chord is provided. If that lowest note is the root will be inverted, and it will show it in an intervallic number here. To lower a pitch, we're looking at either a flat or, depending on the context, possibly a natural as well. Note that there are many more symbols used to raise pitches than there are symbols to lower pitches. And that's because often when we change notes in music, we're raising things. We're creating leading tones, we're using harmonic minor, things like that. When it returns back to normal, we will no longer need that symbol. But if we do need to lower something, we can use one of those. Sometimes a sharp is used even in place of a natural, as a shorthand representation to lower a pitch. And a flat might even be used in place of a natural in context as well. But most of the time, the symbol that you see, the accidental symbol that you see, will be the accidental that you actually use in the music. Now, that's how to understand it. But when it comes time to realizing it, we're looking at this is our bass line, and these are inversion symbols and intervals leading from that. In the Baroque era, musicians would use this as a form to improvise things. An organ player or a keyboard player, harpsichord player, would see this and they would play a bass line, possibly with a cellist looking over their shoulder playing the same line, and they would improvise chords on top of each of these. It was meant to be done at sight, which is pretty crazy to think about. But it's not too terribly different than what a jazz musician would use when they were dealing with a lead sheet or something like that. So, with that in mind, let's start looking through these and analyzing them.